Hallelujah. Everybody's ready for this weekend, I'm sure?
Yes.
Yes. It's going to be an awesome weekend, and tremendous things are going to be happening. And so what I'm looking for is the title of the conference was Unveiling the Mysteries, right? And so we had people ask, unveiling what mystery? Well, the mystery is you. You are the mystery. And so what we're going to do is unveil the mystery of you, and we use a lot of different avenues to do that, and writings, ancient writings, as well as other writings that we have available to us today in our beautiful day of technology. But let me just make it high together anyway this weekend, because the revelation is going to be about you. And I say this everywhere, the Bible is not a history book. That's really difficult for the majority of all people. They have a real hard time with that, because then they say, yeah, but what about all the characters? I say, well, the characters are mythological about the organs and the function of God's temple. So it is about the temple of God. You should know that. I think Paul told you that, right?
Yeah.
Don't you know you are what?
Temple of God.
Well, so it's about that. The temple, which is the body of God, which you are. So it's going to be about that, and I realize there'll be some things that we will share, Mark, myself, and others will share maybe as we go along this weekend. There'll be things that will maybe cause you to think, and that's good, because that's really what we want to do, is cause you to think. And you know, this phrase right here, can everybody read it?
Think outside the box.
That's what we want to do, get you out of the box, because the box is what you're in. And the only way that God is in the box is He's in there with you. But His borders and boundaries aren't limited to you and I. So we want to get outside that box and think, learn to think different. We are on the threshold, and you know, that threshold is like this, and we've already leaned forward with that foot beyond it. So there's no coming back. There's not a return for this. So this is going to be a miraculous weekend, unveiling the mysteries of you. And under that design, I have 3 words that I want to talk about, or just share with you a little. Mysteries, and the other 2 just went out. Mystery and miracles. And I can't think of the other one right at the moment, but it'll come to you in just a minute. But I want to show you how to associate those words together. A miracle is a mystery, but we are a miracle waiting to happen. And I feel in myself this is going to be a miracle weekend of the unveiling of mysteries. And so I know all of you have been waiting on certain miracles in different ways and they are on beyond the threshold of manifesting, and this is going to be something that will pull them out of the unknown into the known. Are there any? Yep, we are truly blessed. Benji and his boys, and we've done several conferences, and they do phenomenal praise and worship, you know, and so we are glad to have them, and we welcome them, and we just want to flow and just let the Spirit of God just use you, bless you, speak to you, heal you, touch you, anything that you want or need or desire. Just put it out there. We'll do it, okay?
And I just want to say that the Raphael family is my family. They are bone of my bone. We are very, very blessed.
Amen.
That the waters were parted. So they trusted that. But then it says, when they dipped their foot in the Jordan, the waters parted. God will always meet us on the dip. If we will step forward, total trust. And you know, when you put your foot forward, when you go so far, there's no coming back.
Yeah.
But He will always meet us on the dip. We can actually trust in Him. That sounds so simple, but it's doing something in me. I've gotten back into Walter Lanyon's books. How many have read Walter Lanyon? Oh my God, in heaven. It's like I've never read them before, because I'm hearing them at such a deep, different level now. And I meant to bring that book tonight because there was the whole book is precious, but I wanted to read something out of it, and I'll bring it tomorrow. But I was just
Yes.
reminded of that scripture, and I just wanted to encourage you. If you will commit to putting your foot, He will meet you on the dip of your foot every time.
Yes.
Lynn, you ready?
Okay. Wow. Okay. Okay, I want to have you do something to start out with. I want you to just touch yourself, and you can touch yourself anywhere. And just say this with me. Say, I am heaven.
I am heaven.
And I am earth.
I am earth.
And I am ready
I am ready
for my miracle.
for my miracle.
And the other word I was thinking of a minute ago is a word that's not used in this arena hardly at all, and that's magic. We're going to show you the magic. So tonight we're going to get into magic. So if you're looking at a miracle, you know that's magic. What we think of now in our society because of dumbing down, we've been dumbed down and are constantly being dumbed down, but what we think of magic is tricks, don't we? If you go in ancient, it's an old word. You don't realize that? It's an ancient, very ancient word, and it deals with the mystery. And it's the mysteries of God. And so what we're going to do, and if you brought a Bible, that's fine. If you didn't, that's fine too. I don't, it doesn't matter that you did or you didn't, but sometimes I say seeing is really believing, or really it's not to believe, it'll open your eyes to things. And so different translations doesn't bother me, that's okay. I will use the King James, since it's the South, you know. We have churches in the South that have KJV only, the marquee. I guess some of you have ever seen those, you know. In other words, if it's not the King James version of the Bible, it's not the Bible. And a lot of the preachers, you know, in the Bible Belt, and the Bible Belt, I guess, is the whole southern district of the country, and we are bathed in the Bible Belt in ignorance. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I didn't say stupidity. There's a huge difference. Ignorance just simply means that I have ignored some things that may belong to me and I'm not aware of them. And so what I would like to do is take us out of ignorance into light. And that's not a disrespectful thing. I'm just kind of finishing up a series I did for last month or so, and I called Ignorance on Fire. And when I called it Ignorance on Fire is all you had to do is go to a real hyper-charismatic movement where there's a lot of charisma and a lot of excitement and a lot of energy, and they can fill you full of a lot of BS, and you think it's truth. I call that ignorance on fire. And you can call it anointing because it looks so much like the same thing, and in some respects it is, because there is such a fire in the anointing, and we've all been under the impression of that. I've been under it, and I know we all have, and so no disrespect to me or to you or any of us. We've all experienced a lot of things. But if you have a Bible, you want to look with me in a couple of places, real simple places like Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2. Because I want to talk about something about my stick man. He's become kind of a popular thing, and I cultivated this character about, I could say, 25 to 30 years ago, doing a teaching in my home church on the 7 churches in the book of Revelation. But what I did with the 7 churches, I used those 7 churches just like you would use the chakra points, because the word church, ecclesio, which is one Greek word, ek or ex, kleo, actually is not what you and I have been told that it is, which is really a sad situation. We told it was the church, and so what we did was we looked for a building with a steeple over it and a cross on the steeple, stained glass windows or things like that, and called that a church. We didn't realize that it was the place where the center of our being were energy crosses. And if you look at the chakra system, or if you look at the DNA, or you look at the caduceus is a medical emblem that's been around for literally thousands and thousands of years. If you look at all of these things, you'll see this crisscrossing. And that crisscrossing is where the energy points cross. And so that's what the stick man is about. And I cultivated him out of the 7 churches of the book of Revelation when I said and I taught the book of Revelations is not about prophetic stuff in the future. That's bull too. Yeah. It's about you. It is about the Son of Man. Ezekiel tells you very clearly that you are the Son of Man. And so we don't recognize that, and many times because of ignorance or just the lack of being informed or the lack of knowing how to either research or read or extract from information that's been given to us. Most of that information has been twisted or tainted, or I'll use a professor's terminology, and he calls it corrupted. So it's hard for you to sit there and hold a King James Bible and someone tell you it's corrupted. But sad to say, that's what's happened. By that I just mean it's been twisted or added to or taken away from, things like that. So just tampered with. Maybe that sounds a little easier. That sounds really hard, corrupt. Because we think of corruption in a different way. Okay. In Hebrew, Barishit, Bara, et Elohim, in et Shamayim, in et Eretz. Now I just quoted Genesis 1 from Hebrew, from the ancient Hebrew text. So I know that you all know that. There's hardly no one that don't know that verse, right? Most everybody knows that verse. But the sad thing is, in knowing it, we don't have a clue what it says. We've been told certain things that it says that it doesn't say. For instance, I have a phrase I use a lot of time, the Hebrew word Barishit, which are the first three English words in the beginning, actually doesn't mean that. It means at your birthing. So a better way of saying Barishit is to take the first glip that the Hebrew Bible starts out with is the Beth, which means the house or temple, and a better use of the word simply means container. So if you take those first 6 glyphs that make the word Barishit, and you looked at them, Beth holds every one of them. Beth is the container of them and everything that follows from thereafter. 256,000 Hebrew glyphs that make up the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, okay? And Beth is the container of all of them. So even though we don't know it because we haven't been taught or we just didn't know how to extract the right research, we didn't know that it is a book about me, you. And that's what it's about. It's not about people fighting and killing each other. The people who are fighting, the Canaanites, Hittites, Jebusites, all of the ites are running rampant in your body right now.
Yeah.
But we don't know that. We haven't been told that. So the wars and the killings of the things that were going on are going on in your physical body right now. And medical science is catching up to that now, something that ancient science knew thousands of years ago. They knew the functions of the physical body more than we do today. So now then, because of quantum science and because of things that are beginning to happen in our world, we're beginning to wake up to ancient truth. Not new truth, ancient truth. And so we're going to tap into a lot of this ancient truth and the way that a lot of the ancient things are put down. So I want to read something to you from this book. I'll read from several different books, and I just quoted you Genesis 1, which if you look at it in your translation, in the beginning God created heaven and earth. Now, when you look at that, you do not see what that says if that's how you interpret it, okay? I'm going to give you one extraction from the Hebrew. I'm just going to read it to you from this translation or this rendition of it, which is really good and accurate. And here's how this would say it. Out of the ever-existing essence. So you call God, God, but don't have a clue what you said. We have been through religion painted a picture of God. Therefore, we always call him or Father. It's very rare that you call him Mother. Even rare to call it it. I used to have people get mad at me if I called God it. Oh, they would get upset. You're calling God it. But listen to this. This is a good rendering. And I told you the word Barishit actually means at your birthing. And actually at your birthing was your beginning in this incarnation. And that's the one you're in right now. So if you want to put it in a context like that and say in the beginning, that's okay. Because Genesis chapter 1 and the first 4 verses of Genesis chapter 2 are about this character right here I call the stick man. There's a Hebrew word that's used in there 7 different times in Genesis chapter 1 and the first 4 verses of chapter 2. And that word in Hebrew is yom. The word in yom means life, abundance of life. It means long life, fullness of that life. It's used that way in many places. How many of you remember the story of Sarah when she had experienced this word yom, which means long life? She got pregnant and she had a child, right? How old was she? Does anybody remember? 90. 90 in Tasada, which happens to actually be number 18. So if I'm going to look at it from the Hebrew code, she was actually 18. Now that does change the picture a lot, don't it? Now you don't have to reconcile a 90-year-old woman who's past her period having a baby. You don't have any problem now. Why? You just had a little bit of insight into Hebrew glyphs. The Hebrew Tasada is at number 18. So, I realize it's difficult for a lot of us to see these things. There's my man. Hey, brother. So I'm going to do some things like that, and I realize that's sort of a ka-ching. You know, you have to stop and think, what did he just say? And so that's really a good reason to have the CDs or the tapes or the videos or whatever. You can go back and look at them and read them and read them and read them over and over and over again, because the more you listen to it or the more you hear it. I have people who call me and say, I have listened to that tape 10 times and every time I get something different. I said, I know it's designed that way. I don't know how it works. It just works that way. So out of the ever-existing essence, there's a lot of different names that I want to try to tag into your repertoire of God. Essence would be one of them. I'd call God essence.
Yes.
I would call God power. I would call God energy. So there are many good terms that I would use outside that phrase, okay? Because if I did like Benji just said, and he throwed a really beautiful little nugget out there, if you got it, when he said Elohim. And the Hebrew word Elohim is plural. It's not any singularity at all about it. There's no way anybody that knows a little bit about Hebrew can say Elohim and make it a plural entity. You can't do it. It's impossible. So it is plural. It does mean plurality. So here he says, out of the ever-existing essence, parentheses, divine, parentheses, or God's, G-O-D-S, shaped the double heaven. Double. I'm going to talk a little about that here in a minute. The upper and the lower heaven, being generally explained as heaven and earth. Now, that's a little different rendition, but that's a lot the way I would define that first verse in Hebrew. Barishit bara Elohim in et shamayim in et eretz. I would define it a lot the same way. But I would come back and I would say some things, and I will, and I'll share some things with you about how I would define it or how I would talk about it. So let me read you something from another character here. I've got so many books that I want to read, and I'll interweave this with the. By the way, that was Madame Blavatsky. I meant to tell you that was Madame Blavatsky. That's Volume 3 of the Secret Doctrine. Okay, Volume 3 of the Secret Doctrine. Used to be hard to get a hold of. Matter of fact, it says on the bottom of this one, and I've had this one for a long time. On the bottom of this one, it says this rare third volume of the Secret Doctrine is virtually impossible to find. Now you can get it anywhere. So this material, thank God, is getting more and more available. Ancient material is becoming more and more predominant. This book was written in 1870-ish, and this was by J. Ralston Skinner. And so I want to share some things with you, and this will probably twist your thoughts and your ideas a little bit. This is about the Garden of Eden. And so I'm going to read just a paragraph here from this particular guy, and then I'm going to extract some things that I think will be beneficial to all of you. Because when you read the Hebrew Bible, you have to begin to learn gematria. You have to begin to learn numbers and study those things so that you can. Numbers don't lie. Numbers always tell you the truth. Having 72 as Adam with a hay on the end of it. So I would call that Adamah, which is translated for ground in Genesis 2:7. It's the word for ground. It hadn't got anything to do with the dirt. But I know you've been told that, but it's not. It's a miracle substance. But anyway, it's where magic comes from. Okay? Then, the Adamah, there is, and here you do numbers, and I'll show you how to do that in just a little bit. There is 72 times 5, or 0.5, and this equals 360. How many of you know what that is? 360? We can do that right here, can't we? I hope these markers show up. I mean, that's not perfect, but that would be close, right? 360? So what would you call that? Circle, right? 360. So isn't that amazing how that worked? From this word Adamah, doing gematria, just doing the numeric values of this word, that's what you come up with. Okay. Then it says having this, equals 360, or if you drop the 0 of 360, drop the 0, it equals 36. Or the great measuring, or astronomical, or geographical circle. So Retz, which is 6 plus 6, equals 12. So if you do gematria on this, 6 plus 6 equals 12. Well, if you look at the circle complete and divide it into 12 slices, or the 12 pieces of the pie, which all ancient mystery is going to be built, as well as everything in the Bible, on what I'm going to put on this board. Very simple, and yet very complex. And I realize it's difficult many times for us to hear it and see it, because it's either new to us or we just are not aware of it. We just haven't been taught. So just bear with it and you'll see. 6 plus 6, which equals 12, or the abstract form becomes Adamah, or 144 minus 5, the Adamah 5, which is the value of these particular glyphs, 5-144-5, another or squared form of itself with the factor value of 5 attached. I know you have to be a mathematician to think about some of this, okay? And I realize the difficulty in it, so just bear with me. Let me go ahead and get this out of the way. Now, it is said that Elohim took Adam, or man, as a fractional portion from Adamah, the earth, or he took him as 144 from 5-144-5, that is Adamah, man, or 144. Is thus derived and is the square of 6 plus 6, which equals 12, or is the square of our square 6 times 6, which equals 36 each, and 36 times 4, which equals 144. Just bear with, I'll show you. And 144 times 5 times 0.5 equals 72. So if I divide the pie into 72 degrees each section, I would get 12 pieces, which would give me the 360 in the circle, which is the dimension of the progression of the equinox as it moves backwards. That's how it moves slow. So it takes it 72 years to move 1 degree. That's why it takes 2,160 years for it to move in one cycle. And that's why we get lost. I mean, there's not that much movement, it takes 72 years. So if you live 72 years, you didn't notice anything happened. Right?
Sure.
I mean, if it moved a hair in 72 years, you didn't realize that, because I had 2 hair fall out last year, and I'm doing good. Hanging in there. Some of them are. So he says equals 72, and 72 is the root square of 1 solar day value. Here, Rat's Earth Mars becomes Adamah, Earth Mars, and also Adam, Man, Mars, while the parallel mathematical use is seen to events. It may be observed that the word or for dust, many times called for or dust, which actually in Hebrew doesn't mean dirt. It means particles of light. We call it photons. Now then, quantum science says, you know what? You're a photonic being.
Yes.
That means you're a light being.
Yes.
God is light. Hello, God.
Yes.
You are light. Weren't you called that? What did Jesus say you were? Jesus said you are the light of the world.
Yeah.
Don't hide it under a bushel. Put it out, right? Okay. It's difficult, isn't it? When I say it the way I say it, it's kind of, yeah, I know you have to think. So when you say afar, dust, translated as dust, you're actually talking about particles of light. So you're a light being. Or rather, broken or fractional parts, the idea of dust being secondary and community condition of the parts of the earth. That'd be enough of him. Skinner gets technical, but the numeric things that he begins to show is what he does is he will go ahead and take the dimensions of the pyramid, and he could show you how that you take the dimensions of the pyramid, and the entire book of Genesis is built off of those dimensions. Every story in it, the names, the years, you think it's years that they live. If you're talking about Enoch, how long did Enoch live? 365 years. If you can understand that and you can see that dimensionally, how many days are there in a year? 365 days. Well, how do you get 365 days out of a circle? Out of a circle. How do you get 365 days out of a circle? It's not hard if you can understand certain hidden principles. Like for instance, this day counts twice. This is always, we call this, and we just experienced it, what, a week and a half ago? What was it? What do we call it on Sunday? Easter, Ashtod. Ashtod, if I said it that way, you probably would say, oh no, we're not doing Ashtod. We're not going to be worshiping the pagan gods, are we?
No.
Maybe we were and didn't know it. Maybe we were ignorant. So if you do it this way, this day counts twice. This day right here, it'll count twice. This day right here will count twice. This day will count. This is the days of equality. In other words, 12 hours in the morning, 12 hours in the evening. This is the longest day of the year, June 21st. This day also equals equality. We call it Libra, correct? And what they have deceived us and tricked us into believing about this particular time is this is the justice system, right? So what do we call Libra? The scales of justice.
Yes.
Well, I would like to protest that and say, no, Libra don't represent the scales of justice. Libra represents the pelvic bone of balance. If you will look at the scales that you look like Libra, if you will look at it, you can see the spinal column as the spinal column holds up the pelvic bone. And if you draw the Adam Kidmon, the astrological man, right here is where his pelvic is at.
Yeah.
And the pelvic is where you learn balance. Justice that we have is not justice, and you know it's not. And if you go by the laws of what you call the Scripture, the laws of justice, they are not just. But if you and I can learn to walk in balance, that means sometimes you may lean a little to the left, which is called tov. Or you could even lean a little to the right, which is called ra. And the Hebrew word ra is translated for your friend, your lover, and evil. Really? Yeah, same word, same Hebrew word. So if I go to the tree of the knowledge of Tov and Ra, I'm going to the tree of the knowledge of left and right. I can understand if I do not learn to balance myself, I can get out of balance.
Amen.
And I may walk in the wrong direction. Why? Because I'm not balanced. You call it justice. but nevertheless you get there. So you have 1, 2, 3, and then this is the shortest day of the year, December the 21st. And then you count over here to December the 25th. This is called the birth of the sun, S-U-N. In all ancient mythology, it's the birth of the sun simply because astrologically, as an astrological fact, the sun dies on the 21st and is reborn on the 25th every year without fail. Period. It happens every year constantly, and has and will as long as there is an earth, and that's forever and ever because it renews itself. So there you have your 1, 2, 3, 4. There's your 5 extra days in your 360-degree circle. So that's how you get 365. And I know you've all been asking that question for the whole life, and I just answered it for you. So it was real simple. It wasn't complicated. You just needed to learn a little bit of astrology. And sad to say that we don't, because sometimes we just don't get the picture. Now, I wanted to read something else to you from this particular book. Let's see, where did I hide that? Some notes that I wrote. I write in these books. Some of them I write so much in them that it's hard for me to see what they wrote as opposed to what I wrote. So here we go. I want you to follow me with this if you can. And this is, if we get the most important word in the Bible wrong, how many of you remember Jesus' teaching? I believe it's in Matthew chapter 8. And he talked about a wise man building his house on sand and another man building his house on rock. Foolish man on sand, wise man on rock. You remember that analogy? Well, I would have to say the majority of us have been foolish and had a house built on sand, and it's constantly washing out from under us, and we're always asking questions. Well, what's going on? What's wrong? And so I want to try to help us to get some clarity on that, and I want to do it with these words. So if we get the most important word in the Bible wrong, that word would be Elohim. Choose more. In going to the Old Testament, God is the major word that's there, right? I mean, it's used 36 times in Genesis, or 32 times in Genesis 1. I forget how many times it's used just in the Old Testament alone. It's used like something like 3,000 times, between 3,000 and 4,000 times. That word God. Most of the time, that word God is Elohim. A few times it's a different word in Hebrew. Most of the time, it's Elohim. And the word Elohim is a plural word, and I will show you that just in a minute. So if we get the most important word in the Bible wrong, and I'm trying to challenge you and me to think, and I realize people call me and say, well, what do I call God? I said, I don't even know. But to call God Father is a miscarriage of the justice of the word, to single it out and to try to put that on it, because it's so difficult to try to say it. There's different ways to say. If I said in Scripture or in ancient Kabbalah, if I use that phrase A-I-N, you wouldn't have a clue what I'm talking about. But really, I'm talking about the source. I'm talking about the essence. I'm talking that which is behind all that is. But if I just used Elohim and I used that word, then I would be talking about the astrological sign and the 12 astrological pieces of that pie, the zoo in the sky. Then I would call that Elohim. That's God. But that's not the source behind everything. That's just a configuration of planets and galaxies and moons and stars that this essence passes through to give different facets of energy to this little ball we call the earth. So anyway, if we get the most important word in the Bible wrong, we have built our whole ideology on a false or maybe even a wrong foundation. In other words, Elohim, or the gods, are the power of fire, or the mother of formation. That's what Elohim refers to. So in that respect, I would put more emphasis on Mother God than I actually would Father God. Because Elohim is feminine, it's not masculine. Now that gets difficult, I realize that. And the way I know that is because the mem, the Hebrew mem that's made up in that word is a feminine word. And that word is used for Martha. You hear the M, the mem.
Yeah.
Mary,
Yeah.
Marine, Mariner, Moses. All of those M words that you see in the Bible are water words, are their M, mem, glyphs. And when they're water words, they have to do with feminine creativity. They have to do with the ability to create.
Wow.
Does that mean that a man or a person we call masculine doesn't have a feminine aspect of creativity? Not at all. Because when we truly see who we are both male and female.
Yeah.
I am Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
I am Esh and Eshah. And me as Esh is translated as man, and Eshah is translated as woman. Me as Esh and Eshah are made from Esh, which is the Hebrew word for fire, which is what Moses had an encounter with in Exodus chapter 3 with the bush. Are we okay? Are we there? So it is from that source of fire, energy, mother, creator. That's what I'm using, and I'm using these different terminologies. So he says the Elohim, I said this right here, is the mother of formation. The Elohim is not one, nor two, or even three gods, but is the host. The host. Now, if you have your Bible, let me have you look with me in Genesis chapter 2 and verse 1. Because I'm going to show you some comparisons or parallels of these words. I think, I'm going to try to. Genesis 2:1, it says, "Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and the hosts of them." Tasada. That word tasada is host in Hebrew. The host of them. Am I saying that the host is the Elohim? Absolutely, yes. It is the 12 angles of the astrological wheel that are translated in most all mythologies as the 12 angels. So the angels do not, whether they're archangels or other seraphims, cherubims, teraphims, any of the other M's, there are actually 12 of them. You can read about them in the book of Enoch. And you can read them in a lot of the Catholic Church knows a lot about these particular things I'm telling you about. We don't. You know why? Because in the Western world, we've been dumbed down to say it's all literal. There's nothing about it literal. You have to realize that all of the Egyptian and Hebrew writings are Oriental. And all of the Orientals wrote in symbolic language. Nothing they wrote about was historical or literal. Everything they wrote was symbolic. You have to go up to Greek mythology. And even in Greek mythology, it's not historical and it's not literal. You do not make Apollo or you do not make Thor or Thoth. These aren't literal historical figures. These are mythological figures. These are stories about energy and the coagulation of that energy in you to cause you to do miraculous things.
Yes.
Causes you to be the visible, physical, manifest God in present reality. We don't know that. Nobody told us. We didn't realize that. So when you see all of these different words, you see all of these different things used in the Hebrew Bible, but we don't have a means cognitively of thinking and connecting these dots, then we come up with some really weird ideas. You have to come to the European Western mind that begin to take things that were told mythologically. And today I hate what's happened to the word myth. I hate what's happened to the word cult. I hate what's happened to the word occult. These are beautiful, precious words that we've got to reclaim. We got to own these words. A cult is a means of worship. An occultic thing is secret. God is the most secret thing that there is. God is the occult. And when you are told that the occult is demonic, it's of the devil, it's you better read your Bible again. How many of you remember that Jesus is called the bright and the morning star?
Yeah.
Well, if I said that to you in Latin, do you know how that would come out? Jesus is the bright and morning Lucifer. What? You call Jesus Lucifer? Yeah, that's what the Latin word Lucifer means. The bright and the morning star, the bringer of light. If you look at 1 Peter, when Jesus is called the day spring or the day star, translating from the Old Testament, same thing in Hebrew as halal, which means light or bringer of light. Or it's the same thing in the Greek New Testament as phos, which again means light. Or in Latin, Lucifer. And I know you all been told that Lucifer, that devil, wicked Satan, I'm sorry, you've been told a story. It's not true. Jesus is called Lucifer in the New Testament. And it's, I know that's a really shaky, hard one to get hold of, but nevertheless. So we go on, he said, many, the many are the hosts, the many. Let me, the first glib, this is a very ancient symbol, and so I'm going to put it up here in two different fashions. And the reason I'm putting it up there is because it's symbolic, and I hope y'all can see that I'm trying to make this green and I'm trying to make this blue. Okay? Yeah. Because those colors, numbers, I mean, everything, ancient Hebrew, all of it is meshed together, it all weaves together. All of it says the same thing, but it says it in different ways, shapes, forms, and fashion. How many of you recognize this? Does anybody recognize that? Can you see it clear out there? It's a symbol. It's an ancient symbol, but sad to say it was picked up here 7 or 8 years ago and used in a negative way. It's the swastika. It's the swastika. Swastika is attached to the cardinal cross. Who do you know that hung on the cardinal cross? The cardinal cross and the swastika are saying the same thing. They're referring to energy. But when you look at the swastika and you understand the colors, you have the marrying of the earth, which is green, and the marrying of the heavens, which are blue. You have the merging of these two. In Genesis 1, that's exactly what you're talking about. It's out of the Elohim, the heavens and the earth are married, they're merged, they are made into one entity. So if I said heaven, immediately you're thinking out in space. But if I said space, that's good, because there's space between you and me, there's space between me and out there. Space is what we use to measure distance and time. But yet we have called that heaven. That's what we have been taught to do. Heaven is the Hebrew word Shemim. Yod-mem. Shemim, Yod-mem. That's the word, this is how you spell heaven in Hebrew. Shemim, Yod-mem. You know, it would be as one word. The reason I divided it in two parts is, you remember he said from above and from below. You remember that? In Genesis 1, if you look at Genesis 1 verse 7 and 8, you see that there were the waters above and the waters below. You remember that phrase? Okay, the waters above refer to fresh water. You can call it rainwater. That's what it is, rainwater. It's fresh water. It's like your lymph node system in your physical body. You have to have that lymph node system like fresh water or fluid, fresh fluid. Then you have another fluid system in your body called your blood system, which is like salt water. So this is fresh water and this is salt water. These are the waters above and these are the waters below. What happens when you put those waters together and coagulate those waters? You have the structure of a physical body. You have your physical body that's made up of fresh water and salt water, right? Think about that. Yeah. So what is heaven? Heaven is a formula of the makeup of the physical body. It's not a place you get to go to. It's not something projected way out there. You are heaven manifested on earth. Then when you come to the Hebrew word earth, aretz, you come up with some many more different beautiful puzzles by just the simple spelling of that Hebrew word. So let me do that. Let me just put it on here and let you chew on this just a little bit. These markers, I'm going to have to get some bigger markers where you can see them. Let me spell it over here on this board right here. In Hebrew, this is the aleph. This is called number 1. And that's glip is referred to, many people refer to it as the ox. So I would call this the symbol for God. Okay? It would just be the symbol that you and I would refer to as God. So let's just say that we would call number 1 representing God. Okay? Now this is the first glip. This is the first character in spelling the word earth. Okay? So it starts out in divine essence. It doesn't start out like dirt. It starts out sort of like in a divine essence. And then it goes to this Hebrew glip. This is called the rash, which is the first glip in the Hebrew word ruach. Y'all heard that? Ruach. Do y'all know what that word is in Hebrew? Ruach. That's the word for the Spirit. You can call it the Holy Spirit if you want to. Now I want you to look at this glip. The first characters here, now this is earth. The first characters, the only 3 in this word, in this particular word called earth, the first 2 characters have to do with God and they have to do with the Spirit. Now I realize you're not extracting earth out of that, I don't think. What are you extracting out? The divine essence. Amen. The divine essence. And then the last glip that we have in this particular word, aretz, is the tesada, final tesada, and which is a value of 900. And this word right here has to do with, get this, this becomes extremely powerful when you see the glips and you begin to understand the value of the 900. Comes from the value of 9. The value of 9 just simply means feminine energy. When you carry it with the 3 digits, 900, now it has the divine essence of feminine energy. So this particular word, earth, is phenomenal when you start to see it, and it ain't got nothing to do with the dirt. So in the very first sentence of Genesis 1:1, here we are talking about how that this essence, this power, this creativity, this fire, this, we call it God, how this has materialized itself as you. In the first word, first sentence. Now, to me, that's phenomenal. It's going back to, now if I begin to build my house, I begin to build my life on this kind of an ideology, do you think it would alter my life?
Oh, yeah.
Tremendously. It'll change your life. You know what? You'll begin to realize that you're not worth less, you're priceless. Because you can't even imagine your value to be a part of this and to go from this place with the creative energy that God is, will change your world and manifest your miracle and bring to pass those very things that you think are way out there.
Amen. Amen. You forget who you was.
Yes.
Absolutely. You don't give a flip about who you was. I'm talking about who you are and who you always have been.
That's right.
Yes.
So you have always been told that you were a dirt, you're a worm. I'm just a lowly sinner. And we have had that hammered down our throats for several hundred years in gross error. But you can go back. You don't have to go back far. You can go back 150 years, 200 years, and the ideologies that they had were built on the ancient Egyptian Hebrew concepts. They were married. They were merged. Let me read you a passage of Scripture that I know that most of us we didn't realize was in the Bible, or if it was, we thought, it's got to be, can't be right. Let's see if I can pull it up here for you. I used to have this book memorized, and I've forgotten some of it. In which time Moses was born and was exceeding fair and nourished in his father's house 3 months. And when he was cast out, Pharaoh's daughter took him up and nourished him for her own. Moses was learned in all of the wisdom of Egypt. The basis of his knowledge was Egyptian. If you take the first 5 books of the Bible, folks, I'm sorry to tell you, the base of them and the root of them is in Egypt. They're rooted in Egyptology.
Yes.
They are rooted in the ancient understandings of the Orients, that everything was based off symbols. So when I write these symbols up here, these symbols represent the energy that God, source, essence is. These are not literal. These are not historical. It hadn't got anything to do with literal characters and a historical event that happened to them. And it don't happen to you now. Every one of you has it. Well, I wonder why God don't do what He did then. You know why? Because you won't let Him, because of the garbage. I'm trying not to say bad words. I'm doing my best. Because I have been known to sometimes say, well, he shouldn't have never said that, and I agree with him. I really shouldn't have did, but I did. You know what, it slips out. It's just like spit. Once you get on the front row and you get spit on, you done been anointed. Now listen to this. Moses was learning all of the wisdom of the Egyptians, and he was mighty in word and speech. And you know what they told you? He stuttered, so he needed Aaron to talk for him. I'm reading right out of your King James Bible. Mighty in word and speech. Now, who do you think Moses represents? You. What does this name mean? What does the Hebrew name Moshe? It means to be drawn up out of water. Look at this. Sheen Mem. This is a water word. Has a 400 value. It's the word that we get feminine names from, like Mary, Martha, Magdalene, Mariner, Marine. Water. Yod Mem. This is the final Mem. This has a value of 600. 6 is the number of man. So this is man with the divine essence about him. This is man with the fire of the energy that God is. Now I want you to see that this is called heaven. You have always projected heaven out there. You've never looked in the mirror and said, hello, heaven.
Yeah.
How you been doing? Not so good. You need to check with your arrests. Your earth.
Yeah.
Because when you check in with your earth and you begin to realize that your earth is made of the divine essence that all that God is,
Yes.
and is here as the feminine energy to manifest your world and bring it into pass.
Oh, yes. Yes.
I don't know about you, that's nearly running good. Y'all can go ahead and be Pentecostal. Somebody jump up and shout and run. Right?
Come on.
Hallelujah. I want to read you a little note I wrote yesterday, just some time of just prodding and thinking. We should never fear the world of the unseen. Now, when I'm talking about Oriental, I'm talking about Egyptian, I'm talking about Hebrew, I'm talking about these ancient cultures. Yes, I'm talking about Hindu in its pure sense. I'm not talking about the corruption that we see in our world today. I'm talking about it in its pure sense. When I'm talking about Buddhism, I'm talking about it in its pure sense. You know, if y'all would just expand your mind a little bit, read the Tao Te Ching, read some other outside your box information, you realize, wow, the entire book of Proverbs is built on the Tao Te Ching. You didn't realize that. I know you did. And I remember years ago when I was actually doing seminary studies with Dave, and Phil with so many questions, asked him so many questions, finally he said, "Talk for me, man, you asked too many questions." I said, well, inquiring minds just want to know. Because I didn't understand all this religious stuff. It didn't make sense to me. And he said, well, you got to take it literal everywhere you can take it literal. And the rest of the time it's symbolic. And I said, well, doesn't that mean that anybody that wants to can take it literal anywhere they want to, in any place they want to, and say it's symbolic anywhere else? Well, yeah. I said, well, that's a lot of confusion, ain't it? I said, over there in the book of Revelation, is Jesus a four-footed animal called a sheep and going around going, bah? He said, no. I said, so that's symbolic then? Yeah. I said, so you can't take it literal and you can't take it symbolic. I said, so the whole thing is symbols and signs. No, he didn't like it. So we should never fear the world of the unseen, or what we call the world of the spirit. Or, listen to this, we should never fear the world of blank, of the blank. And I put a big question mark there. Space. That's what most people are afraid of. You know what you call it? The world of the unseen. We would even call it the world of darkness. I even heard a conversation about darkness. And people just never read the book of Isaiah, or they've never heard my series called The Glorious Darkness, because that's where God's at.
Yes.
That's where the essence, that's where the energy, that's where creativity is at. Creativity's hid in the darkness.
Yes.
That is the light.
Yes.
The light shines out of the darkness. But do you know what religion teaches you? Fear that. That's where the demons and the devils and the goblets and the ghosts and the hosts are at. And when they tell you the ghosts and the hosts, then they're trying to say the hosts are all of those wicked angels and stuff. There are angels that create things that you and I could call, I don't think wicked would be a good term, maybe bad maybe, or what we would say negative energy. I know y'all have never had one of those days. I remember I pastored in Indiana for a few years. In Indiana, the middle part of the winter, there was a period of time when it was not sunny at all, and so I think one time it went for a period of 28 days and the sun didn't shine, and then people were beginning to be suicidal, and they even announced on the radio, you know, that it was a period of time people were having low negative energy because of the lack of sun, so they were committing suicide. It was, yeah.
Yeah, you know, I use the old King James every now and then, and people say they say I'm quoting it wrong and stuff like that every now and then. John 3:13 backs you up. Jesus said, "And no man hath ascended up to heaven, but he that came down from heaven, even the Son of Man, which is in heaven."
There you go.
And he was standing on earth right then.
Right there. Yeah, and so what I'm
So he was standing in his own body.
exactly, and if you'll take that, if you just read the very next verse, and you'll see that he was actually called the serpent on the pole.
Yep.
You mean
Yeah.
Jesus was a snake on the pole? That's exactly what it says.
Yeah.
He was the serpent on the pole, but you have to realize, folks, coming back to this is the pole, this is the astrological wheel, the cardinal cross. Oh, we have so perverted this in Christianity. I'm sorry. I am a Christian. I am a Christed one. But I'm telling you, we have been so deceived and so lied to about the Son of Man. You are the Son of Man.
Yes.
Yes, brother.
Just like he said, the mistranslation that you were getting at is that he didn't say go and sin no more. He's just going back to being sinless. So you are sinless, you're perfect. That is the misrepresentation of that statement in the Bible. And pretty much everywhere you go there is he didn't say go and sin no more in the respect of don't keep sinning. He said go back to be perfect. That's what he said.
Because you are perfect.
Right.
Exactly. Going back to the 7 yoms, back to when I was telling you the introduction of the 7
Yeah.
Hebrew yoms.
Yes.
That word yom got translated for the word day. That's why they're called 7 so-called days. They weren't 7 so-called days. They're so-called 7 facets of the fullness of life. And once we get all 7 of these cylinders working properly, the length of the
Yes.
days that we can live are a lot.
Amen.
I'm talking long life. I will satisfy you and show you my completeness, my wellness, my blessing. Long life. Who was it the other day that was telling us about these folks over in some country that were living, ladies were, there were some known to be 120 and older. Who was telling us that? You remember? I don't remember. Someone was telling us about that they were living, right now, I'm talking about right now,
The oldest documented lady at that time was
125 years old. And still doing fine. Still doing good. I tell you, in America, folks, we need to get serious about our health. We need to get serious about what's going on in our country, because they're trying to kill you and me. They're dumbing us down and trying to kill us.
Amen.
And we got to do something about it. And I tell you, the truth will really set you free. And religion, I'm sorry, you won't go to church and find this. I hate that. I'm disappointed that. I've been a pastor for 37 years. And I know that there are not, I've been called the devil, I've been called demonic, I've been called Lucifer, I've been called one of the imps of Satan, whatever. Listen to this now. We should never fear the world of the unseen, or what we call spirit world, or what we call blank space or darkness or the unseen, for there is nothing there to fear. The only thing that there is the potential. The only thing that is there is the potential for everything. Out of what you don't know, most of the time, when you're in darkness and you don't know, many times we draw out of that fear, and fear hath torment, and torment throws your body completely out of kilter, and then it begins to cause your blood system, and it can cause your lymph node system to not function properly the way they're designed to function, and then in your blood system begin to be Canaanites and Hittites and Jebusites, and they do all kinds of crazy stuff. Stress you out. Make you sick. And there's war going on inside your body. So the only thing that is there in that realm is the potential for everything. And I put everything in capital letters because everything. In other words, you can create your own chaos, and most of the time you do. The world of the unseen is the domain of creativity, or it's the divine essence, or the unseen energy waiting on you and me to pull on it. And when you pull on that energy is not biased as to what you create with it. Help us to hear that. It is not biased. If you want to create a lot of hell, you can do it. And we do, and we have. And that energy will assist you and give you a belly full of it.
It's called
And we've
unconditional
done it.
love.
I'm sorry?
Unconditional love.
That's exactly right, Kirby. Unconditional love. Loves you, period. Maybe it's saying, you really don't want that, but here you go. I give you a belly full. Just waiting on you and me to pull on it. And my analogy here, and I'm using that word pull on it just exactly like a baby. When a baby is hungry, immediately he begins to draw. He does this intuitively, and immediately the milk in the mother's breast begins to release itself, and it's ready to turn loose. Why? That baby's pulling on it. That's how you and me are with the essence of energy. And that energy is there to feed you, to manifest in you and through you whatever you're desiring to manifest. Check up what you're manifesting. The world of the seen. Now, let me give you another story. The world of the seen is the world of tricks, deceit, manipulation. Boy, we see it now all the time.
Yeah.
That's the material, the manifest world. The material, the manifest world is the tricky one. It's the one that'll deceive you. It's a sleight of hand. It's the one that you really need to watch out for, but not be afraid of.
It's the have-nots.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the world of tricks and deceits and manipulation.
Yep.
The religious world has mastered the use of it.
Yeah.
They trick you all the time. And I'm telling you, they have learned one of the most powerful instruments you got. And that's both your intuitive nature and your experiential nature. Because through your emotions, you are constantly creating, just on a constant basis. And buddy, now you think they hadn't learned to use that against you, against me, against us? Oh, I tell you, they have. Lord have mercy. Just as I am. One more time. Ain't going to hell.
Well,
Whoa, they pull on them emotions, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you could be saved as saved could ever get saved and go to that and say, oh my God, I might have said something I shouldn't have said. I better go get saved again.
Revelation tells you all about it.
Pull on them emotions. Really they do. The religious world uses this to control us, to deceive us by telling us that there are demons and ghosts and devils and so forth that you can't see. Lies, lies, lies.
Fear.
Greek mythology talked about the dues daemon inversa. One of the first places that you'll find the word demon used. Greek mythology, dues daemon inversa. You know what that word means? In Greek, it means that the mirror shows you yourself in reverse. That's your demon.
Whoa. Whoa.
Wow.
It's not even used in the Old Testament Hebrew, folks. It just is not used there. It's Greek mythology. I'm all for Greek mythology. I'm a mythologist. I love mythology. I mean, I totally do love. I want to have a rebirth for mythology. As a matter of fact, mythology is where I learn. I am initiated to where I will have the ability to tell these fabulous stories, whether I'm talking about Apollo, or whether I'm talking about Hercules, or whether I'm talking about Jesus. I can do it with such energy and with such clarity that you begin to see it as you, and you are energized by the power of that mythology. That's what a myth is. It's to energize you and connect you with the real you. The energetic you, the creative you. But religion uses this to control us, to deceive us by telling us that there are demons and there are ghosts and there are devils and all of these other things which do not exist. I'm not ashamed to tell you that. They don't exist. I heard one of the real popular television preachers talking about a story. It was very funny, and he is funny, and I do enjoy listening to him. I enjoy listening to some of that foolishness. He was talking about that night. He was in this place or a motel or in somebody's house, and he said he woke up in the middle of the night, and he said right there at the foot of his bed, right up in a dark area in the wall, he said there stood Lucifer face to face. And he said, man, he got up in the bed, and he said, I rebuke you, devil. And the thing just kind of danced around at him, and he thought, and then he done his intercession. I rebuke you, devil. I cast you out. Get out of here. And he does this for an hour and a half, and all of a sudden the sun begins to come up, and the room begins to lighten up, and there hanging on a coat hanger was a big old white coat, and every time the air conditioner come on, it just rolled. Shandala. There's your demons. Figments of your own imagination. It's funny, but it's foolish.
Yeah.
But man, how many, I went through that. We used to go to their houses and cast them out. Dear God, I've cast them out of their closets. I cast them out of their air conditioning vents. I cast them out of their body, bless God. Boom, I slap them on the head, knock them down, pour oil all over them, get on the floor and wrestle with them, bless God. Come out of there, you devil. I mean, we fight them right down there. We wasn't afraid. Yeah, pardon me, that wasn't me, that was bleak. We did that in the world. I mean, you know, wrestle that rascal down there. Get the better apprehension. Anyway. Oh, well, it's your turn, Mark. Let me wind this up. Let me go ahead and just quit. This is just a tip of the iceberg of this weekend. What I want to share, some things I want to share, but we want to have fun.
Yes.
But we want to be enlightened, and we want to be
Yes.
empowered. This weekend is about empowering you. This is about empowering you to make your miracle. Let's shake this stuff off. My goodness, we have been under the weight of this religious garbage too long.
Yes.
I mean, it's time
Amen.
to drink you a cold beer and get free.
Amen.
And, or whatever, I'm sorry, do something and free yourself up. I wanted to read one other thing from here, just so much. Let me read it from this book. I'll just kind of close with this, and I want to read you this because I had wrote something and I can't find it. I thought I must have left it at the house, and I guess I'll just have to wait until tomorrow. Here we go. I found it. Right under my nose. It's where it's always at, isn't it? right under my nose. Let me read you this. I wrote this. Today, especially in the Western world, and especially in America, American Christianity, we have a huge problem of understanding the mysteries, or in other words, the magic, which is rich, and it's in all the Oriental writings, which include Buddhism, Hindu, Shama, Chaldean, Hebrew, Egyptian, which were, and you know, I wanted to, this evening, there's just no time for me to do all of it. My brain just goes in so many directions. I wanted to show you about the Chaldeans and about the teraphims. Y'all have heard of the teraphims, haven't you? If y'all ever heard, you can read about them in the book of Judges. They're just another one of the 12 angles of the M's, the 12 astrological angles that have creative energy, because essence, power, passes through them. And once you see that, once you start to see that, man, there's nothing there to fear. You realize, my goodness, this thing is constantly spewing out energy and power for creation, and all I've got to do is tap into it. All I've got to do is release it. All I got to do is pull on it. It's just simply there. It's just there for me, to go to me and through me and everything. So all of these that I just mentioned, ancient cultures, all of them wrote in symbols. All of them. Symbols. You can go there to this very day. You can go to Egypt and see the symbols that have been there. Some say as many as 56,000 years without doubt. Carved in stone. I can show you the cardinal cross. I can show you the swastika, which is a very, very important symbol once we understand it. We need to reclaim this stuff. We have allowed people who had intents to deceive, we have allowed them to deceive us. These symbols, we need to reclaim these symbols method. The Greek took these same writings and they wrote them in myths. They didn't mean to change them. They didn't mean to do it. They began to write them in myths. Myths just simply mean, now they took the symbols and wrote great big stories around them. And you know that y'all have all told the stories of Greek mythology, and they are phenomenal. Matter of fact, I'm glad to see Hollywood producing a lot of good movies off these mythology. And then, guess what happened? The Western world, which include Europe and Italy, took all of these mythologies, all of these ancient symbols, and twisted them into history rather than mystery. And you and I bought that lie and said these were historical events. And it's amazing that you can't find a one of these characters in history. That should tell you something. You know, they're constantly, and I realize it, I hear people sometimes in the background on my CD list, I hear somebody listening, it's not true. I saw on the History Channel yesterday, last week, Sunday night, bless God, they showed they found the Noah's Ark up there on the edge of that mountain. They really know they got it. They ain't never gonna find it because it ain't there. You are the ark.
All right.
What does Noah mean? What is Noah all about? Noah is about the grace of God. Look at his life. Even when he's drunk and doing some really strange stuff, the grace of God is still on him, and God never left him, and God didn't call him a sinner, and God didn't burn him in hell.
Amen. Yes.
So if I look at the life of Noah and I begin to realize Noah is representing the God of my salvation, the God of my energy, the God of my grace.
Yes.
And I begin to see it in a completely different light, and I begin to realize you can't float a boat that big in 22 feet of water, because that's how deep it says the water got. I know y'all didn't read it, but it's just right there and very clear as the nose on your face. 22 feet of water covered the earth. Would y'all like for me to read that to you? Yeah, right.
In the Sumerian text, they actually talk about the fact in their version of it that Noah took the seed of all things. So if you look at that, you look at genetics and gene splicing and stuff, way back then that they had that kind of a mentality. You know, and I'm not saying it's literal. All I'm getting at is that they actually had
They had the technology and the knowledge, absolutely.
It wasn't foreign to them. It didn't seem absurd. They understood that they were able to split the atoms.
Absolutely. They were able to do
and now it doesn't sound absurd that he had all these test tubes of all the animals on his boat in 22 feet of water.
There you go. So I'm right, exactly. As I say, I'm on same page with Brian, I will guarantee you they had stem cell perfected. They had it way beyond anything we have ever dreamed or heard of. But here we're going back way beyond the 5,000, 6,000 year old ideology or Christianized,
Yeah.
historical, literal. Folks, that ain't true. So let
Where
me,
did Abram come from? He was Samaritan.
there you go. When we get into the Samaritan and the Chaldeans, I'll get into that some in the morning, I think. I'll try my best to get there. But we get into that, and we get into the teraphim. Just the teraphim, just to have one. You remember the father of Abraham,
Yeah.
Raham, Sarah, Abram, Sarah, Abram, Sarah, Brim. That's your upper brain.
Yeah.
The story of Abram and Sarah is the story of your upper brain and how it functions, your cerebrum. The story of the wandering of the children of Israel, or the story of the ox or the bull-headed, said you're stubborn and bull-headed, is your Sarah bull-headed. That's your cerebellum right back there. That's her sensual apparatus. That's the sensual brain. The Bible is a book, an analogical book about the physical makeup of the body. And all the characters are about that, the organs and everything. They are symbolic. Symbolic, not literal and historical. Listen to this. This is the book of Enoch. Westerns who are so lacking in rich imaginativeness. You're not tonight, are you? Helping you stretch your imagination. Of the Oriental. Our love of literalness hinders the play of the imagination because we are so apt to materialize a mental picture presented by another. The apocalypses were written by and for Orientals. They weren't written for a Western mind that thinks they're literal. And a Western mind reading an apocalyptic doctrine of symbolism can literally destroy it.
Yeah.
This is an apocalyptic book, but it's a symbolic book. Nothing in it literal. And I hear these phenomenal preachers, degrees longer than your arm, taking this stuff and trying to make it literal. Taking these. I'll be nice here. I mean, my grandfather had to say, ignorance gonna see. And sometimes I listen to that and I think, did ignorance really go to seed? I love Alvin Boyd Coon and his way of saying it, and he really hammered the early church fathers in there. They were ignorantly asleep. And they were. They were asleep, ignorantly asleep at the wheel, and allowed this stuff to come down the pipe for us. A mental picture was presented by another. The apocalypses were written by and for Orientals, and we cannot do justice to them unless we remember this. But it would be best if we could get into the Oriental mind and look at things from that point of view instead of looking at it from a literal point of view. Okay, hallelujah. I'm just gonna stop right there and let's have a water break. Just maybe take a 5-minute break. And y'all can stretch your feet, and then Mark's going to come and just bless your socks off. Mark and I have started doing this kind of tag team teaching a number of years back, so I know most of you know Mark, you're familiar with Mark, but Mark Eaton from Dallas, Texas, I call him my Greek scholar that complements my Hebrew, my Southern Hebrew. So.
I have no idea what all I'm going to say tonight. But that's never stopped me before. So I'm going to just kind of talk some things that's been kind of rolling around in me. But tomorrow and Sunday and whenever I speak, I'm going to get into my journey of linguistics, and I'm going to talk about where I've been about the last 2 years after I had 3 divine dreams. And so these dreams was kind of like downloads, and so I've been working on what I was going to share the next time I was with Lynn for about 2 years. So I've shared it here and there, but the whole thing, I have poster boards that I can actually show you and pass around and things like that. So I think y'all will find that very interesting. Even if you don't maybe understand everything I'm saying, you're going to be able to look at the posters and things of that nature. I want to start here. My thinking is that we're at a crossover.
Yeah.
Very significant is several years ago, a video came out that was on TBN, and there was a group of ministers there, and Benny Hinn was there, and all of a sudden, Mark Sharona, those of y'all that know him, said, when Billy Graham passes away, there will be an absolute awakening, and it will be the death of the Passover age. Almost interesting parallel that my wife brought up last night was almost simultaneously was the death of the man in quantum physics, Stephen Hawking. And so parallel is we're crossing Jordan, and I thought that was interesting that you brought up Jordan, Annie, is that we are now seeing the death not only of the Pentecostal age, but also the death of science that said we're just happenstance. We're just a big glob of accidents. Because we really are completely divinely designed.
Yes.
So we have crossed over into another dimension. And so we are now seeing in both parallel worlds the complete death of the old view of God. Mr. Eckhart said the greatest hindrance to the new view of God was the old one.
Yes.
You know, I remember when I was in sonship and I got all the reconciliation of all, I thought they'd be happy about it. But some people said, somebody has to go to hell. And since you're preaching that blasphemy, it's got to be you. So this is, first of all, I want to say this is Friday night. And this is really awesome that we can hang out together and you can hear my hillbilly, Hebrew chicken scratch. I am originally from Arkansas. Some of y'all may not know me. I live in Dallas, Texas. I was asked recently if I grew up a Pentecostal. I said, no, I was a hillbilly holy roller. You Pentecostals, that was just the name on the door. So we like to shout and holler and sing Jesus on the Main Line every Sunday. If you know that a particular song is going to make people shout, how many of y'all know you eventually play that song? And so we had services that would drag on for hours until somebody would sing, Jesus on the Main Line, damn it, and then everybody would happy. My wife's in the back said, don't sing, stop it. So several years ago in 1998, we got this opportunity to become associate pastors. Isn't that cool? You know, in Charismania, you know, it was all about this title. And so we moved out there with people we didn't know, lived with people we didn't know. We looked like we were about to be homeless because we started having disagreements with all the people we didn't know very well that we just moved out with. And I sat there and I got a yellow notepad and I said, I'm going to write my Greek thesis. That was 1998. I'm going to start writing lexicons in 2014. And I remember somebody said, why not? And I said, why not? I ain't got nothing to lose. And so the Greek thesis that I had was that in the 1980s, everybody was about etymology. Isn't it interesting that some of the greatest word studies we ever heard were people who could do it without a computer? I mean, I go back to the 80s, and I'm like, dudes, where did you find this stuff? Because I got an internet and I can't find it. But it was a time of etymology. And then we have this thing called semantic rings that birthed in the 90s. And that was important too, taking that word and looking at it every place. And so I sat one day and I said, I'm going to see a marriage of etymology and semantic range. And I want to go back in that Greek and I want to trace it back to the Hebrew root. And I want to pull the Hebrew root through. And then I wanted to do the one thing that my mentor, Rick Renner, did, and he studied classical Greek, which means he knew classical Greek stories. If you go to the Assemblies of God in Springfield, Missouri, and you look up their Greek section, it's called European languages, because they don't separate the classical from the koinonia. But we do, because we say we got Baptist Greek, Catholic Greek, you know. I had Word of Faith Greek. So I started going back to the classical Greek, and then I would compare that, which most of the time was philosophy, to the Hebrew root. And I said, I'm gonna write a dictionary. I've done 750 words so far. They're back here on the back table. Well, recently I said, I'm gonna do something even crazier. I'm gonna write my Hebrew thesis. And I didn't know this was coming right after I wrote it. And so I thought about the fact that several years ago, Kathy and I were flat broke, homeless, working with a pastor, moving to Dallas. Our circumstances looked helpless, and I wrote a Greek thesis. Well, here we are back, and by the way, we came out okay. We're still there in Dallas. We're not homeless. But here recently, I had this thing with my job. I had to transfer. They start cutting me down to 45 hours a week, and I'm used to 55 to 60. And so all the pressure was on. They were trying to go faster and faster. And I thought, in the midst of all this turmoil, why don't I write my Hebrew thesis? And so I started working on it. And I'm going to share some of that this weekend. So I started meditating on the fact that when I was in Brunswick last, I actually ministered a message about idea, paradox, and concept. You are the living expression. You are God's idea manifested.
Yes.
And if you embrace that, if you drink that, if you taste that, it becomes a living expression. Our problem is our concept of what we think we are and what we think God is. I grew up Pentecostal. God was schizophrenic. Because he was real happy until this thing called the Holy Spirit, who was real moody, got mad or wroth. And then all of a sudden, we're supposed to almost fall dead. I said, please don't come. Come, Holy Spirit. The only verse I knew is he struck people dead. I said, don't go. Stay back. And they called him the Holy Ghost, not the Holy Spirit. So I was even more scared of him. So then we have this thing in the middle called paradox, or as Lynn says, conundrum. I don't know how to spell that, so I don't know that. By the way, my wife, I have mastered now Greek, Hebrew, and I'm mastering Aramaic, particularly Chaldean, Assyrian Aramaic. But my wife has got me for next Christmas hooked on phonics for English. And she's about gave up. So I've been playing with this whole idea of Hebrew and Greek thought. I hammer it in almost every conference I have, because having written and spent so much time in Greek thought that when I got into Hebrew, I turned God into a comic book. I remember when I read the book Piercing the Darkness and This Present Darkness. Dude, I was finding Chinese things in the sky to go fight. I mean, my whole emphasis was praise and worship was a chance to go into my head, become Iron Man, and fight demons. And I brought all this with me all these years. Sure, I got rid of the terminology, but I was still in the box. And it's amazing to me how we keep recreating demonic symbols and just changing terminology. Because fear, phobias, people have always got to hammer on the fear. And one of the things that I do in meditation constantly is I say, have I begin in any way to fear? If I've stepped out of fear, I've stepped out of the awareness of love.
Yeah.
So that's something I do in meditation. But as I began to look at this, I hammered so much Hebrew and Greek thought, and I could talk about that for hours. I began to hear about this term called abstract concrete. And what was really interesting is that I started looking at websites, and I realized these jokers would switch these two. They would say, oh, Hebrew is concrete. Some people would say abstract is Greek. And they were reversing them. And I began to think about this whole idea of what we call abstract, because most of the time when we talk about abstract, we talk about something that is symbolic, right? I remember E.W. Kenyon said in his book, 1984, this Orientalist Hebrew I said, what was that? And I went to the very people that told me they knew what they were talking about. I said, give me Oriental Hebrew. They thought I was crazy. I said, well, Kenyon knew about it. What's Oriental Hebrew? And I've been looking ever since. I found a lot about it. So in this whole concept of abstract, we have metaphysical, which is attached to Hebrew, and you have concrete. But if you go to some of these websites, they reverse them. Now, why do they reverse them? Because they're trying to say that the Hebrew is more concrete. So I started studying these terms, and I realized something. We are all in the midst of being purified. Zephaniah 3:9 says, you will come to a pure language. I didn't say that. God said it. So we are coming to a pure Hebrew as these codes explode. And this is the thing, the last time I talked to Lynn, this is one of the things that I want to talk about. We have got to, in America, move from word study to code study. Now, what I do in Greek, which I'm fixing to do, is definitely word study. Because you not only got to study the word, you got to study the philosophy behind the word. I never forget growing up hearing so much philosophy from preachers who told me, don't study philosophy. Oh, renew the mind, but don't read about the mind. So I would go to the library and I would read everything. Because I knew they had lied to me so much. And I found all this stuff that years later I went back to because I was too scared that the devil was getting a hold of it. So, thank God for books and libraries. So when I began to move into Greek study, which I'm fixing to do, but when you move into Hebrew, you are no longer studying a word, you are studying a code. And people don't get that because we still have this mentality of word studies, but the Hebrew language is not a word and a language. It is a code. And I have spent the last few years of my life seeing how wonderful, how marvelous this code is, and how the fact that we have only woken up to a little bit of it, but what we have found is that people that are outside of the church find this fascinating, and we can't cram it down the religious people, even if we used a big shovel. But we are crossing over into another dimension, which means just as we have moved out of our old language, we are now having a pure language being birthed. And I'm not talking about just linguistics, I'm talking about even out of children. The other day, I wrote this symbol. I was at a Pentecostal church, which is a part of my upbringing. Don't laugh at my Aleph, Lynn. No, I'm just kidding. I had the Aleph. I always write Hebrew. Nobody pays nobody ever took pictures of it. And so I said, here's polio, which Lynn referred to as an ox. That's polio. When I wrote this on here, children that were 12 years old and up went up and got their iPads and phone and took a picture of that. That's the symbol of an ox. And so I was asked afterward if we could build Hebrew word puzzles based on Paleo Hebrew. These young children are drawn to these glyphs. Even more so, I was in a place where I was teaching from an archaeology rock, which is half Sanskrit and half Hebrew, and a child walks over to me who was around 13, 14 years old, and she said, I got to show you something. I said, what? She said, I've been in prayer, and I've been getting the same symbols written in my notebook for 2 years. Now, that really made me feel like I knew a lot. She getting a download. I've been working on this thing for 25 years. It's because there's a different energy in these children. And they're not going to put up with all these filters that we've told them, which is nothing but concepts. Or us trying to get some concrete view. And the thing is, I don't live in abstract and I don't live in concrete, I live in paradox. People ask me all the time, are you Trinitarian? Yes and no. I live in paradox. And I tell you, I have met people very much in this room who are very metaphysical in Hebrew. But I've met people in Greek who are either Gnostics or they're trying to cram their belief system down everybody's throat. And they're teaching Greek philosophy, but think they're teaching Pentecostalism because they're obsessed with the physical body and its beauty, not who designed it. That's why in the Pentecostal movement, it was all obsessed on how you looked. We absolutely covered up a design of God that is a humanly complete, beautiful design. And we told those Pentecostals, but your body is nothing but evil. That came right out of Greek philosophy. We didn't know it because we didn't study. If you took, commenting on what you said about time and space, if you took, a book years ago was written by Michael Tabor called The Holographic Universe. And I mentioned Stephen Hawking and this other guy. They have a book called The Black Hole Wars. And they have figured out if you go, Stephen Hawking said if you went into a black hole, you would lose time and space. And it would be completely lost. This other guy, who was a Jewish professor, said, no, you won't lose it. It'd be in another dimension. That's what I agree with. But we don't really know what space is. But as far as time, when you go to an anesthesiologist and you have surgery and you come out of the surgery, what do you say? Hey, when am I going in? Oh, they're done with you. They took it all out. You're done. What? Where'd your view of time go? You lost total consciousness of time. If we could tap into that, we could reverse time. And you do it every time you go in surgery. There's a part of us. The brain is only a hologram of your mind. Sila. That's your word.
Amen.
So we don't even realize the untapped library we can have access. I did not get what I'm going to share this weekend out of books. I got it out of a dream and thought I had too much pizza. I said, well, we ain't doing Pizza Hut again because that was really crazy. So we did Domino's and it got worse. He mentioned the word.
You should try cutting dog.
Yeah. I always, when I travel, go to Godfathers. I dream of, Yeah. We have this word, mysterion, translated in the Greek New Testament as the word mystery. It comes from the root muo, which is not even, by the way, in your Greek New Testament. That's classical Greek, which means to shut the mouth. It meant to be initiated into the secrets, and to, not that you shut your mouth because you don't want no one to know, but you were initiated into the secrets that were for you. That's the first step to all of what we're talking about. But what's the second unveiling of the mysteries? It's this word, empanano. You know what? If you look up a Strong's, I got this from Ron Oja, and you look up the Strong's for 2014, it's that Greek word. That is the word that we get the English word epiphany. You can trace this word and this word to this Hebrew word, yair, and you know what yair means? Not only is it meant mistranslated fear, it can be translated reverence, but if you go over to the paleoglyphs, it means to flow from the gut. So, this word here, epi, that means higher dimension to plan on, to shine the light, and this, both of these words come from this Greek word, phos, which means to hit and manifest to the eyes. The ayin. And this word here is where we get the English word photons, which is dimensions of light. So this here is a cluster of words. This is word that's used in the Greek when it says, "in the great and terrible day of the Lord." It wasn't talking about bad stuff coming and Transformers and all that stuff, Hollywood. It's talking about a great dimension of light that will flow from the gut, yair. So there you got to do the Hebrew, Greek words. Well, then we're coming now into this, apocalypto, which is the full disclosure of everything. Now, do you know where we get this word ephanano? We get this from Greek mythology. That's the only information we know. If you don't study classical Greek and you don't study this word, you have no idea what these words are, and these are the Greek words that are attached to the full disclosure.
lines of what you're saying. The bastardization of the written word in the Bible was really obscured when it went from Hebrew to Greek, and then what they do, the Latin
Yes.
came in. And if you look at the hybridation of it in any grammatical sense, when you hybrid a Greek word and a Latin word, you negate one or the other essence of the word. So you literally, they purposely false taught us certain things and translated it in that way to obscure the actual meanings of the original intent of the
Exactly.
word.
And the thing is that although it was never lost, because the Vatican's had it the whole time,
Thank you.
Yes.
but it was lost to us.
Thank that exactly.
And the Greek world took over and gave us a philosophical way of viewing things. And so without these precise definitions, everything became obscure. When we get into Latin, they decided, okay, the main Latin we're going to keep, which, by the way, Latin is a derivative of Sanskrit, which is the biggest vibrational language in the world, along with Egypt. But they took the Latin, then they created what was called Dog Latin, and that was for the common people. And the church wrote contracts in language they didn't understand so they could break them and kill them when they broke it. So all of our different ideas we have has come to this place in the European Western world where we now read these stories and we read these concepts in them because we have been so trained to think so. And I tell people this and they think, okay, because you've mastered it. No, I have to catch myself. Because when I go down the road and I watch TV, before you know it, I'm carrying all this baggage. And it's when I get back into these Hebrew codes and I think, oh my gosh, where did I come up with that one? So we are moving from this philosophical, there's nothing wrong with philosophy if it's in its proper place, but we are moving from this philosophical Latin concept into that original intent of the ancient Hebrew, which will unlock every language of the world. Because you can go back and trace this, your history, and here's the problem. Here's the biggest thing about duality. Duality is this versus that, right? And so instead of there being a marriage of these things, we're constantly caught up in this right here. This, us versus them. Us versus them. Instead of realizing that all of this can be linked back to these ancient languages and these ancient roots, and that we can see the beautiful thing that has been expressing itself as an idea of God. But if we get into this thing, which is concepts, we will constantly battle the very images in our head that we reduce God to. And therefore it reduced us to. And I listen to, when I listen to people, because I struggle in English, you can see that, I listen to them in Greek and Hebrew. And I listen to how profoundly silly some of these ideas are. But because somebody promotes it and somebody gets behind it. I had a guy tell me one time, I came and preached in his church on the grace of God, and he wanted to have lunch with me. And when we went out to lunch, he said, I got to tell you something. He said, do you remember in your warfare days you was teaching so much in spiritual warfare? I said, yeah. He said, I had to bet you'd end up in a mental institution. And I said, why? He said, you were obsessed. You were convinced that your view of evil could make you popular. And he said, what happened to you? I said, I met a metaphysical wife that kept doing things, and I spent more time trying to correct her. And then I started, instead of trying to correct her and we getting through marital problems, I started studying the very things that she was saying because I realized she didn't have that filter. She didn't grow up in the religious world I did. God could just speak to her and he could just go right through the filter. And me, well, now, wait a minute, now, let's see. Calvin said, see, I had all these filters. Boy, I'm having a beautiful detox. See, I never did, no, listen, I never hung out with girls who drink and chew and hung out with girls that do. That's not totally true. But anyway, we'll just say it is for now. But my drug was religion. I was addicted to going down there and having a fix at an old-fashioned altar so that I could feel better about myself through the week. And God forbid I had a bad thought or I'd have to start all over again. And so I was told the Holy Spirit was my key. 1986, I asked God, I said, God, who is the Holy Spirit? He said, third person. I said, he's the third person of the Godhead. All right? He goes, and it was funny. God asked me that question. I said, well, he don't know. He interrupted me begging him to give me a question. Like, I know anything. But I told him what I knew. He's the third person of the Godhead. God said, how do you know? Do you know he did not answer that question until 3 years later? See, God is not, our ideas of God are so bound up in time that we now don't realize we're working on ancient secrets that have been going on for ages, and in those dimensions there is no time. I remember years ago, my wife calls me a vibrational linguistic. And she named me that, and I went back to her. I remember I was in a meeting when I said I would only do Greek, never do Hebrew or Aramaic, which I'm doing now. And this man, his name is David Holst, was in a prophetic flow, and he looked at me and he said, acoustic, am I saying that word? Acoustic linguistic. And I said, what is that? He said, don't look for the word, tap into the sound that birthed the language, the glyph. And I said, what was that all about? And so then we went out to eat, and he said, Mark, one day, he said that, he said, you'll study Aramaic, and you'll tap into the holographic universe. I said, I'm going back over here to my Strongs. I ain't never done none of that stuff. Well, here I am. And listen, just as I have pulled this Hebrew word yarer through these Greek words that is epiphany, you can do the same thing in Aramaic. In fact, this is the thing. Aramaic scholars, you're either totally metaphysical or you're totally cultural. They don't have a conceptual world like we do. And half of what we've been told in the Middle East is all lies anyways, because it's what religion tells them to put on the TV. You go over there, it ain't nothing like they say. I was told, look out for the Islamic Antichrist. When they tell me that, I said, well, y'all left Russia around. I guarantee you that's the biggest treasure chest that we have ever seen. I could tell you stories of when I was in high school, a man that was from the Middle East brought a Sumerian lexicon, and I was into Kenneth Copeland and all those guys, nothing against them, but I said, well, they're all going to hell anyway. And they said, well, will you do the presentation? So I did. And the teacher dropped, she goes, oh my gosh, where'd you find that? She said, there is no Sumerian lexicon. So he got one. Mm-hmm. You know, about 20 years later, God wakes me up and hey, I'm trying to show you something. And that's that I was born to do this. And the beauty of these things that I'm seeing is that from now, I'm not looking, listen, if I see God as idea, abstract, and Hebrew, or God as concrete, and I'm starting into this paradox, guess what? I am moving out of non-judgment, which means I see you differently.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We think that this is all, listen, every person who talks crazy like we do devours the Bible. We don't discard it. We can't put it down because we know it wasn't what they said it was. But the more that we see this different view of ourselves, the more we see you differently. And it's causing a complete shift because I'm realizing that just as this is a coded book, so are you. We went out to the ocean today. And we were looking at the ocean. We were in all these different islands. You know, and I'm sitting back here, the Hebrew word and strong. And I look at my wife, and she's reading her book. Her books is not books like my books. She's out there, she's fixing to jump in the water, you know. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, she's reading her book. And we've always been geared that way. We have never been geared the same. I don't know why people say, well, you all got to be just like each other. Well, we overcome that hurdle years ago, you know. But it's so beautiful because now I'm going back to these stories. I'm going back to these linguistics, and it's blowing my mind because every time, and I said this 2 years ago, you are the Rosetta Stone I'm not trying to wait for the next archaeological dig. I already know inside of me this is happening, and these guys are trying to keep up with it. I'm no longer trying to chase down these things that people think are important, because you're the rock I want to read. I want to read your glyphs. So there's been a lot of study on how, and some of you in this room know more about this than I do, but we've did all of these studies of how we take the vowels and we bring them down into these 3-letter codes. Do you know in DNA research that is called, well, in Hebrew it's called a sheresh. You bring things down to the 3 Hebrew verbs. But do you know in medical science, they're creating computers and they're investigating quantum computers who will study your DNA, and they go back to what's called a codon, which is a 3-letter thing. When you're studying the 3 letters of the Hebrew alphabet and dropping your verbs, you are studying your own DNA. Now, the thing that is so fascinating about this is that once you start unlocking these glyphs, it's like a cluster, because you start seeing this glyph in every single language. I see it in Aramaic, I see it in Greek, and then I have what's called the kaleidoscope effect, which means every language of the world. This guy right here, Timothy Smith, wrote a book called The Channeling Key, and he did the Bible code, and it gave him a Japanese word and spelled out his name, which is Timotheus, which is a Greek name. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think the Bible code is for a future event, apocalyptic. I think it's to reveal the character and nature of you. And so what do the people do? They see this Japanese thing. What do I do? Japanese and Hebrew is the same thing. Go into these temples in Japan and you will see pure Hebrew. See, the problem is we are still approaching anything foreign as if they don't know what they're doing. And we're really coming into a fast, steadily rate that says the people who are supposed to know what they're supposed to know about these languages are the people who are in the dark. I go to these seminaries, I go to theological institutions and find stuff that if they knew it was in there, they'd get rid of it. But it's too late. I don't have it. So yeah, years ago, this was in the 90s, the Bible code came out. And I went to get in the Bible code, and God said, don't mess with that one. Wait till the next one. I said, what? There's another one coming. Well, in 2009, somebody said the word Elohim and Yahweh, or Aha, Yahweh, or Yahweh. And so I ordered CDs. And he only did 3 Hebrew words. He only did mention the Hebrew code in 3 CDs, never said the word anything about Hebrew. And that was Lynn Hayes. Then I found one, and he was talking about Elohim and Yahweh, and he said, you can put this in your pipe and smoke. I said, I got the CDs I was looking for. And so I actually didn't know him, so I put him in my trash truck. I said, well, they break. I don't care. I don't know who he is. And I'm sitting there driving my trash truck going, oh my gosh. Because this is the thing that I've been looking for, because all the other Hebrew I'd run into made God into an absolute tyrant and a schizophrenic. In fact, in 2004, I called up the local pastor and challenged him because he kept quoting Dr. Robert Young, and he said, Dr. Robert Young said this about Hebrew verbs. I said, okay, prove it. And he said, it's in the beginning of the Youngs. I went and bought one. There's nothing in the beginning of the Youngs. There is the older you go back. I got one from Lutterworth, England. It's got more in it than England. Young was a linguistic. He did more than Greek, Hebrew, and Chaldean, which that threw me in the 80s. Chaldean. What's a Chaldean? I went to my pastor. What's a Chaldean? I don't know. We think it's Aramaic. We don't know. And so for years of my life, I've been asking, what's the Chaldean? And they told me, oh, it's the birthplace of magic. I said, well, how come everybody in the 1800s called it Chaldean? Y'all call it Aramaic and tell me it's the birthplace of magic. Somebody lying, and most of the time, those guys back there got it right. And so I spent my life studying people from Scotland and Edinburgh, not just because of them, but they had a certain frequency. And I started studying and said, well, it come to the point, so I'm going to do this right. I'm going to move to Dallas, Texas, to a Jewish community and learn Messianic Hebrew. I was so confused. Because the whole time I'm going to their temple, somebody invites me to a British Israel church. Now I'm really confused. I said, oh no. I put Hebrew down, I'm going back to Greek. At least these guys, I know what, I can get my lexicons, and I went back to Greek. In 2009, this fire on the inside of me, these letters of fire kept growing and growing and growing. And I started listening to Lynn, and just exploded. So I went down and I found all this Hebrew in the local libraries, and took them to Lynn and pointed them out, and about 10 of them, he said, BS, 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 BS. I said, well, okay. So, but there was one book on Aramaic, which was really Paleo-Hebrew. And I said, I'm going to spend my life looking for this. You know what happens? Now, y'all, this is my point for tonight. When the puzzle you're looking for starts coming together, how did you get to it? Your intuition, your knowing, living in paradox. And you know what? When this thing comes together, if you ain't careful, you'll make a tangent out of it, and you'll get out of your intuition and start trying to prove things. And the second you start trying to prove things is the second you step out of what you're walking in. And there are millions of people right now that are preachers who are caught in their own contrast, in their own concrete abstract, because they're trying to prove the very thing that never got them there. And thank God I have people around me that come to me and say, hey, I think you're going in the wrong direction here. Because these puzzles in the last 2 years have started, people will show stuff up in my mailbox. I don't know who they are. They just said, this book is an absolute blasphemy. Please read it and tell me what you think. Well, if it's so blasphemy, how come you sent me to read it? And then I call them back and say, this is great. You know that's complete, absolutely lies from the pits of hell. I said, I'm enjoying it, thank you. One guy he had this Baptist sounding name, and I grew up Pentecostal Baptist, so I can say that. In the first half of the book, he was talking like he was, come as you are, all you, that whole deal. And then halfway through the book, he changed his name to Yada, which means I know. Which means he started channeling the rest of the book. I said, what in the world is this? But he had Hebrew insights in there that blew my mind. And I said, how do you get a hand on this? But see, I quit looking for confirmation or my belief system, and I just started playing with this stuff. Because Albert Einstein said the imagination is greater than knowledge. And I began to have fun. I began to look at this stuff. I started studying, and stuff started coming in the mail. And then I woke up with dreams. People I can't even find on this planet talking to me. And saying, look, read this book. And I'm like, that book don't exist. I look it up on Amazon. Like Amazon knows everything. I go to half price and it's sitting right there. I said, look at that. Amazon said they don't exist. I go to half price. You got this book. He said, man, we got everything online. No one will know how I got there. I don't know how I got there, but I materialize it, create it, and I'm having fun with it. I ordered a book here recently, and it was supposed to get in 2 days, and my Amazon truck was riding around, didn't have my book. I stopped her. She said, what's your problem? I said, I'm looking for my book. She said, you'll hold your turn, huh? It came like a day later. Amazon is now playing with the idea in Dallas to deliver no longer by truck, but by drones. Now, if I have half price, Amazon, it's going to look like Star Wars over my house because they drop books off all the time. I don't have to worry about my neighbors. They don't speak English, so they don't mess with it. I have a friend of mine, his name's Mike Clegg, has a book back there. He said he has a Baptist woman clean his house. He had to hide the books. I don't know what you're reading astrology for. So anyways. And he's in a small town, and you know how that goes. But here is the thing. When you start getting a hold of the code becomes these sheresh, these letters, these glyphs, become a means to begin to, as a cluster, decipher. You start seeing these glyphs in every language. You start seeing them in trees. You start seeing them everywhere. They become alive. It's not a dead alphabet.
Right.
It's a chemistry.
Right.
And then when that happens, you start deciphering other languages, and then all of a sudden there's this kaleidoscope, and you start seeing God in technicolor rather than this religious tradition that says he's a gray-headed old man, as Lynn says, who's hard of hearing, and if we get too loud, he might fall over and die. That's what we were told. But when you start getting into these glyphs, and here is the thing that is so powerful. I believe that we are embarking on the very things that people have known for years. And they've been waiting for us to come forward and begin to say these things. I read in 1950 a man by the name of Joseph Fritzmeier. He was a Catholic scholar, and he said, if you're going to study Aramaic, study Palestinian Aramaic. Don't go back to the Syriac, go back to the Chaldean, don't go back there. Now, for most of religious people, they left it alone. But there were some people back then that said, why can't we go back there? And you get back into the Chaldean, the Assyrian, the Aramaic, you'll find a whole metaphysical world that will agree with the ancient Hebrew, and it's being uncovered like it has never been uncovered before. But most of us don't know this because Aramaic is popular outside the Bible Belt. You know, when you stand up and do Hebrew and Greek in the Bible Belt, everybody thinks you're Baptist. So they're looking for this literal, okay, he's gonna, and the thing that got me was they always argue over stuff that has no importance whatsoever. Well, we've had a big discussion and we had 3 comments. We think it was the color brown. I'm like, but when you start going to the places like California and Chicago and places like this, there is treasure troves in those places of Hebrew and Aramaic because they don't have the filters I grew up with. And I'm getting to go explore all this stuff. Michigan. But we have met more than one person while we're sitting at Starbucks. I don't know, I guess that's my office. Who are from Assyria or who are from the Middle East. And everything they tell us says that what the religion tells us happens over there is a complete lie. Because they don't go by some literal story that they've read hundreds and hundreds of years. They're great storytellers. And they grew up having oral things delivered to them in stories. And we have this whole context of how we view things over there that we have carried over into this other dimension. I was at a conference recently, and there's a woman who is a Messianic Jew, and God spoke to her and said, I want you to pray protection for my children. She said, okay, I'll do it. Okay, God. She said, Abraham's children's got to be blessed. Yes, hallelujah. Glory be to God. Now go down to that mosque and tell them that. Huh? Well, her husband is a devout Messianic Orthodox Jew. She said, guess what God told me? He goes, no. And so they had this whole prayer thing. And so what do you mean? And half the people in there were all freaked out by what she said. Because in our day and time, just as we have there's all these ideas of people. But I live in the most multicultural place on the planet. And what is so awesome is that they know I have no filters and no judgment, and they open up to me in a way that you couldn't imagine. But when I grew up in Russellville, Arkansas, every person that wasn't King James only were all dying and going to hell anyway. And I'll be honest with you, I was so obsessed in getting me right that I didn't see half of them people or the beauty in them people. So I asked God recently, God spoke to me. And I'll close with this. So I'm going to eat some victuals or cheese and crackers, whatever you'll do. Okay. I was sitting there, driving my trash truck. And this has to do with the Chaldean. I'm driving down the road. And my boss has cut my hours, I said, well, I'm starting to rethink this thing about the devil. But anyway, so and God said, the reason you came to Dallas, Texas was to learn Hebrew. But I came out there thinking I was going to get involved in Jewish history, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I got open to a whole nother world. I got the kaleidoscope, not just one people, okay? And so I was like, okay. He said, that's coming to an end. This was almost 2 years ago. He said, find wherever Aramaic is happening and go there and hang out. Now, years ago when I grew up in Fayetteville, Arkansas, all the Greek was happening in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So we always went over there to learn Greek under Bob Gannon and Rick Kramer. When I moved to Dallas, it was to learn Hebrew, because I went to my people that was my pastors, told them I wanted to learn Hebrew, and they gave me the same BS I tried to give Lynn. So I said, I'm going to learn this right. Well, year goes by, 2 years, I still don't know where the Aramaic is. So I said, I'm going to make a trip to the Middle East. I'm going to go over, I'm going to learn this. You wouldn't believe where I found the Aramaic scholar. Arkansas. The very place I come from. I said, how in the world did you get over here? And he starts telling me where this stuff, I said, man, these are not places I'd ever go. One of them, Springfield, Missouri. I walked into a bookstore called Renaissance, and there's Aramaic stuff from Rocco Errico and Lom stuff that I never even knew was in print. Now, why is all this? Well, about, I would say, 2 weeks after that, I'm driving off my trash truck. I'm coming off of this overpass. I'm going to Dallas traffic. Talking about a bunch of aliens. No, I'm just kidding. Anyways, we come down, and the drive shaft hits a cord and kills my power. I'm driving dead, no power, into traffic, and I am out of control. And I just coast right in between where these cones are in construction. Thank God for construction. The construction cone is the symbol of Texas, not the armadillo. That's all they do is construction. Anyway, so I coast over there and I said, God, what now? And he said, and this is no lie, he said, you have said a lot of things, but you still have fear in your heart. And I'm about to give you the power and the presence. And from that day forward, when I would begin to talk about Hebrew, I was always afraid I was going to offend somebody. And that fear just left. And God talks to me through my trash truck. Yes, he does. So, every time they change the number on my truck or give me another truck, I get a revelation. Talk about Ron Oja. And recently, right before I left here, they said, we're going to put a new number on your truck. And they numbered it, but it's not on the side. So I don't count. And they said, how come your truck keeps getting skipped? Because that's all about numbers, right? Numbers don't lie. But I used to have to drive 5840, which was a test. So every time my truck broke down, I went 5840. So I'm going through a test. What'd you say? I don't know. So in this whole kaleidoscope of God and the numbers, I'm seeing these things. And now I'm realizing that the very things I'm looking for was the last place I expected. We use her in Dalton. Last year I went Memorial Day. I went to a guy's house, went down there. There's a library in the dark. Now y'all know I love books, right? I said, what's that? Oh, no, I said, no, what's that? Let me see. No. So I get up there to the guy's den and I said, hey man, just a question. I said, why am I here? And why do you like my linguistics? And he goes, well, Doc, of course. I said, who's Doc? Gene Scott. That's part of his library down there in the dark. I said, we're going down there. That was in Arkansas. That's part of my Nephilim series that I'm doing, because I'm realizing that you think, and I said this, Lynn, where you were gone, so I'm just going to say it because you took a bathroom break. But listen to this. We have the internet, which is a grand thing. But people in the 80s and in the 1800s did etymology that blows away what we can do with computers. And we have a generation that doesn't know anything about it. I ask a person a question, they look up on Wikipedia and say, who are you in Christ? I said, your name's not on Wikipedia? And I told them, I was telling them about the real Indiana Jones, which was Venda Jones. They looked up on the internet. I said, I got 2 books, you want to read them? No. And I said, oh my gosh, we got a generation that has so much knowledge at their exposure, but they have no imagination. And that is the one thing we have, that we can play in these ancient glyphs. But let me tell you, as much as I can say I'm old school, that's the very generation who's being drawn to these energy glyphs. Because I've been talking about this to Bresterville and Pentecostal people for years. You know what they say? Yeah, hey, I just want to know, is God a Trinity or one? Okay. Go to the next church. I want to ask you something. Do you think there's anything to the fact that the Bible says things about Egypt? So I was kicked out of every church in the town for asking questions. And God forbid I got an answer. Then I got two of them. Except one Baptist minister who would give me 10 minutes in his pulpit every Sunday morning. He was a brave man. I taught him Satan, evil. I mean, I obliterated the whole paradigm of sovereignty and all that. And I asked him, I said, why do you do this? He said, because my people study when you teach. He said, they go home and try to beat you and look you up wrong. I said, well, my critics always say more and see more in me than people that like me. I preached for years, Greek, Hebrew, not a word. I'd say, hey, man, what'd you say? Oh, that's an awesome message. What'd I say? I don't know, but we eating Chinese? But my critics know exactly what I said. And there's a lot of people that are critical at this point of what we're saying, but we're crossing over. And there's a young generation. So I'm realizing now that I can't sit, in my 80s mindset, that there's a generation who wants these glyphs. And I have spent too much time fighting the older people when they don't have to have this. This little girl showed me a notebook of what I worked on for 36 years. Hey, I'm coming to your house. Because there's an energy about them that's pulling it out of us. You talk about the Rosetta Stone, not only is this stuff birthing when you find it in yourself, but this younger generation is not going to have to be coached out of their crazy view of God because they know that God is energy. I didn't read one verse. Can you believe that? Let me read one verse real quick. Let me give you a Pentecostal. Let me read you this verse. 2 Peter 1. I told you I didn't know why I was going to say that I got up here. That's all right. 2 Peter. Right here. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who according to his great mercy has caused us to be born in a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Okay, that's New American Standard. Let me read it to you out of the Passion Translation. I like this. By the way, this guy, I don't know if his Greek's that good, but he has Hebrew and Aramaic footnotes. And in charismatic people, it makes their hair stand on the back of the head that he does it. And that's cool for me. It's called the Passion Translation, New Translation. Let me read to you 1 Peter 1 in it. It says, celebrate with praises the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has showed us extravagant mercy. For his fountain of mercy has given us new life, that we are reborn to experience a living, energetic hope. We are reborn to experience a living and energy. It's not just a living hope, it's an energy. And the Greek word for, y'all are pulling it out of me tonight. The Greek word for hope is this word, and we've translated that as the phrase good expectation. But it comes from a Hebrew word that means the Hebrew word for wait and the Hebrew word for hope is the same word, and it means to intertwine together. The Hebrew root, and so therefore it's that which has become entwined. And if you study quantum physics, none of us are separated because we're all entangled together in the same universe. So this is not a hope that God has wishful thinking. This is a hope that is a quantum term that means you can never just get a sliver of God, you get the whole universe. And you are the holograph of God. And therefore we're not talking about a hope that is based on some belief system. It's an energy.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Go ahead.
This is going to blow you away here when I'm going to share this, but from 2 Timothy, the first one, I've been sitting here for a few moments, you're going over Aramaic. The vowel sounds of all the different dialects, when I realized that the actual phonics of the vowel sounds kind of correlated all together from Hindu, Aramaic, and the Hopi Indians. The Hopi Indians have one of the rawest, purest forms of the vowel dialects in the actual formation that they come out of the existence of creating sound. And Hindu and Aramaic are very, all three unaltered. Add Hopi Indians to their dialect to your research of the Aramaic, sir. I was given this message for, like I said, to give it, and all of a sudden you said, I gotta read one verse, and it was hope. And then literally, you probably said hope at least several different times. You talked about quantumizing it, and literally the word symbiotic is what we need to think about, is that it's all symbiotic. You can't take one from the other. And that's going to help you out when you live in Texas, you're right there by Arizona. The Chachina is still the doll that's made in the Hopi Indians. They know that the Chachina is coming back. You have the Christ, the Chachina, and all these different things that are all symbiotic together. I'm just going to say, I don't know what that means to you, but look up the Hopi Indians and their dialectic of the vowels. Pay attention to the vowels of all the different things. The vav that comes from, that is the thing that pins it in the Aramaic root, is the symbol of the vav, is pinned on the earth. Look up the Hopi Indians. That was something that was kind of given to me to share with you.
I talked to an Indian Native American linguistic, and I asked him, where did the Cherokee language come from? And he said the Aramaic Essene language that they contributed that Jesus spoke.
Thank you very much.
Now, also see ancient Hebrew in that.
Yeah.
But that was a linguistic years ago, and I talked to him about translating a Bible from Greek into modern Cherokee, and he said, no, we don't want that. We want this, because he said they have already so westernized us that we can't translate. So they were looking for a translate. At the time, I couldn't do it because I couldn't do Aramaic. Yep. See, he said that, so I got one more verse. 2 Peter 1, verse 12 says, I don't hesitate to continue to remind you of these truths, even though you are aware of them and well established in the present measure of truth you have already embraced. As long as I live, I will continue to awaken you with this reminder. The present measurement of truth. That's space and time. See, we have been so caught up that truth can be contained in space and time that we can't awaken to the fact that we're awakened to ancient truths that will awaken us in the very place we are as they were when they were first spoken. And I appreciate that linguistical thing, because I tell you, when the more Aramaic I see, the more I see these glyphs. Because most people who do Aramaic also do Paleo-Hebrew, because they're trying to find a root around all of this bull crap, or Lynn would say another word, BS, that has been going on all of these years. And I don't care what language. You do it through Hopi, Cherokee, whatever. It don't matter what route you're going to come to the same source, and you're going to find that these linguistics were all birthed out of the same sound. And if you tap into that light and that sound and knock something over, hallelujah, then you will come into the vibration of which it was birthed. And your Genesis will look like Lynn's and just fall open there, and you won't have to take nothing. I tell you, there is a place that we are going beyond word translation, and we are beginning to translate the vibration, because these vibrations have been there from the beginning.
Yeah.
And we have a culture that one word can mean 15 things, like the word nice or the word ice. We have all this term and slang. It didn't exist in the ancient world because they knew the power of the sound of these glyphs. So, I gave you my word, I'm quitting, so I'm quitting. But if you come this weekend, me and all the speakers who will be involved, you will see some things that has to do with the original Chaldean. And I'm going to answer you why they called it Aramaic and quit calling it Chaldean. And it's because there is so much Chaldean and ancient Hebrew that we haven't even disclosed yet. And here's my question I want to throw at you. How did people in the 18th century that predated 1855 and 1870 knew about a linguistical breakthrough that didn't happen until the Dead Sea Scrolls, because we didn't have Paleo-Hebrew until the Dead Sea Scrolls. How did they know about it? And how come I'm finding evidence of it? You know why? Because whether or not we want to admit it or not, these glyphs are either going to come through these children. And we don't get it linguistically, and we are. These glyphs are coming. And that pure language will produce a pure sound, and we will be able to do in seconds what has took us years in all this religious jargon.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
What? I danced all around.